Good evening. You've tuned in to Framed and Bound, a podcast about films set in the literary world. My name is Tobias Carroll, and this week I'm joined by David James Keaton, whose new book is the novel Shallow Ends. We'll be discussing the 1987 film Bestseller, directed by John Flynn, written by Larry Cohen, and starring James Woods, Brian Dennehy, and Victoria Tennant. Dennehy plays a Los Angeles police officer with a second career as a true crime writer. Woods is a hired killer who approaches Dennehy, offering him inside information on a corrupt businessman. Bestseller is available to rent online from Google and Apple. You can also watch it for free on Tubi, the Roku channel, and Pluto. It's also available to own on Blu-ray and DVD. It's funny, I was trying to remember if I had ever seen this before, because I feel like when I was growing up, I saw a lot of movies with Brian Dennehy, and mostly Brian Dennehy playing a cop. I have a very soft spot in my heart for the FX and FX2 films.
Oh, absolutely. I was actually confused thinking that this was a Larry Cohen movie.
Well, didn't he wrote it though, right?
Or no. I'm confused right now. I was actually confused that somehow FX, special effects, and Bestseller were all there's like you said, Brian Dennehy was always I always knew I was in good hands.
Yeah.
When it was a Brian Dennehy movie. Just a real lovable bear of a guy.
Yeah.
And he always, like you said, he always seemed to play a cop, but he always seemed to be in the buddy situation where he'd be partnered up with somebody who wasn't like him at all.
Yeah.
And that's happening in this one, but also the FX movies, like you said, they were definitely felt like that kind of buddy cop thing going on there that was kind of like subverting the genre with this one, because it's like Larry Cohen seems to be thinking, let's partner if we're doing a buddy cop movie, who's the absolute worst person to partner him with?
Yeah.
So now it's a cliche, the other end of the coin is, you're so much like me, the villain is just like the hero, blah blah blah. But back then it probably seemed kind of subversive to make him partnered up with an assassin, and he treats it that way. Denny just brutally it's not like 48 hours. He's beating on him and he's telling him he's going to kill him. He doesn't get endeared to him as quickly as you thought, or even much at all.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it was, I was with you as far as I thought I was going to be watching kind of a Brian Dennehy movie. And I guess I was watching more of a James Woods movie, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's especially, and without, I guess, spoilers for a film that's almost 40 years old at this point, but it is, I mean, I guess to the extent that, like, if you're going to say one of these characters changes, I mean, Brian Dennehy isn't, but Brian, I mean, then again, he's not really a guy who needs to change in the sense that, like, well, and I'll come back to this as well, but like, he seems to be a pretty on the level guy. Like, he seems to be a pretty good cop. He seems to be a pretty good writer. He seems to be a good father to his daughter. Like, he doesn't
giant head. He's like giant-headed rock of nobility.
Yeah.
Everything he does is, he doesn't ever, usually in these movies the cop starts to get tainted by he starts to get corrupted by his weird partner. And he never does that. He's always, if he's abusing anyone, it's just other assassins, those low rent assassins that he's kind of picking on. But everything he does is very straight laced, which again is kind of, that was another part of my Larry Cohen confusion was I always thought he did FX and FX2, because there's a movie called Special Effects with Eric Bogosian. Have you ever seen that?
I have not, no.
It's from this era. I'd highly recommend it just because it's definitely Larry Cohen trying to do a Hitchcock plot. And the plot part of it is the fun part, so I won't spoil it. But it isn't, even though it's called Special Effects, it has nothing to do with special effects. I think the original title was The Cutting Room or The Cutting Room Floor, which makes more sense.
Yeah.
because it's kind of a Dario Argento knockoff Hitchcock thing going on. But it was definitely like most of Larry Cohen movies dealing with his anger at Hollywood. There's a lot of digs in this where he seems to be very successful as a B movie auteur, but also raging against maybe his perception of not being as big as he thought he should be. Or
Yeah.
there's, but that Bogosian movie, he makes a good avatar for Larry Cohen, or what I imagine him to be.
Yeah.
And so in this one, I would ask you: is who is Dennehy doesn't represent Larry Cohen? I think James Woods is supposed to be the sarcastic, kind of anti-Hollywood trickster that he puts in all his movies.
Yeah.
Moriarty becomes that in like Q and It's Alive,
Yeah.
and but
It's, I
yeah,
mean,
it's go ahead.
it's, there was one moment, like, I kind of wish that there had been maybe a little, like, there were definitely times where I felt like, okay, this is a Larry Cohen screenplay, and there were a couple of other moments where it felt a little bit more generic. But there was that great moment in in not the very beginning, but the sort of the present day scene where we're introduced to Dennehy's character, where he's foiling a diamond heist, and the lead robber tries to carjack a guy, and the guy who he's trying to carjack just pulls out a gun, and he's just like, "No, I'm on my break. Get out of my
Right.
car."
Yeah.
Which was just such a great like turnaround of like, wait, I feel kind of bad for this guy who's gone on kind of a murder spree, because like he can't even catch a break when he's trying to carjack a, a guy who just wants to eat his lunch in his car.
Yeah, that is kind of the New York of Q and those other movies. That's the thing about this movie is like it's in all his other movies, it's a high concept B movie, which is, I guess, in a perfect world, all B movies are high concept, where they're doing something daring they would normally do in the A movie.
Yeah,
But a lot of the times, that's what's such a bummer about most of B movies is you just end up with something that imitates. It's trying just to imitate the big movie. It's failing at it.
yeah,
So that moment you described there is one of those moments where you feel like it is sort of subversive, that you found a good B movie because it's going to do things that it wouldn't normally do, and it does those things. But it also, I think you're pointing out that weird off kilter. Is this a Hollywood movie? Was it trying to be one? Because it doesn't. I would argue it's not successful. I love it, but I
yeah.
don't think it's good. I think that it gets
No, I
it.
feel. Oh yeah,
it I was just going to say that I don't want to get to the ending already, but that was something that Larry Cohen hated. But as far as the high concept idea, we should probably get that maybe on the record. Is what's the plot in like 10 words or less? What's going on here?
yeah. Well, actually, the one, even before we get into the plot, I just want to say, and this is, and I feel like one of the things I really enjoyed about this is usually when I'm talking about movies, I will end up just talking about the character by the actor's name. But I feel like the naming the two leads, the cop, the Brian Dennehy character is named, last name is Meacham, and the James Woods character is Cleve. And I feel like those are both so. I mean, the killer is named literally after an act of violence, and Meacham is just like, oh, he's a, like, Brian Dennehy is absolutely a chummy guy in pretty much every,
Oh,
almost
okay. I
every
didn't I
role that he
didn't think
has.
about the Meacham, but yeah, Meacham does sound huggable.
And yeah, and so the and Meacham is a cop who's also a writer, whose first big hit was writing about this heist that happened in the 70s. Uh, and it became a big thing, and he kind of has had dual careers as police officer and author, but he's been
Somehow
sort of.
maintaining undercover work, even though
I
he's a famous author.
That was one of the things where I was like, wait, maybe wait a minute. I'm not
And
totally sure I
a
buy this.
very distinct looking famous author. He's a big bear of, he's like Where the Wild Things Are, and he's running around the docks, and it's like, don't you
Yeah.
know him from his famous novel Inside Job? Just it seems very, very weird that he would be doing that.
And then Cleve, who's sort of been a corporate hitman, approaches him and wants him to write sort of the story of his life, which is also the story of how this businessman used the money from that robbery to essentially build a corporate empire and employed Cleve to murder anyone who stood to stand in his way. Um,
Yeah.
and one of the things, actually, it's a movie that to go to your point about it not totally working, it's a tight like 100 or sorry, tight 95 minutes. But there are definitely points in here where I wish this was a little bit longer, because like one of the things that's periodically brought up is Cleve actually being honest with Meacham, or is he lying to him? And that's never really, like, it gets brought up a few times, but it's never really taken seriously. And I think some of it is the actor who plays the businessman, who is sort of behind, pulling all the strings behind them. When he does have a scene with Dennehy late in the film, it's very good, and he does do a very good job of being this sort of portraying this sort of wealth and corruption. I mean, I believe when I looked him up on Wikipedia, it looks like the actor had AIDS for several years at that point. So I can also
Really?
understand that, like, maybe he wasn't really in a good condition to, he wasn't in the best of health, and, couldn't do a lot of scenes. And, but
I thought he did, but I think he was. If you look at how there's the villain, none of the villains have any real presence except for James Woods. He just kind
yeah,
of keeps running into. It's kind of video gamey, just different levels of bad guys that he deals with.
yeah,
They sort of get more effective as it goes. There's some sort of new hitman that they've hired. They set it up like it's going to be some kind of battle, and he just dispatches him like nothing. But I'm
yeah.
surprised you said that. Was it Madlock? Speaking of your name,
Matlock, yeah,
he has a great voice, and I recognized his voice from Scarface
yeah,
because he has all those that baritone and threatening lines to Tony.
yeah,
And so yeah, he has about the only presence as far as an adversary in the
yeah,
movie. So that's impressive that he did it while he was ill. He
yeah,
says he immediately throws me off when he says to Meacham, "I've been an admirer of your work, especially your last book." It's like, isn't that the opposite of what you've already told? Like the first book hit, and the other books didn't work because he has this meeting with, I assume, are agents and
yeah,
publicists or something, and they all say, well, things aren't working, and he's got writer's block, et cetera, et cetera. So it's weird that I think they maybe got that line wrong, because it would make sense if Madlock says, I'm an admirer of your first book,
yeah,
the one that involved the crime that I committed. That's actually a zinger that he could deliver to, and like everybody in the moment would be like, I know what you're talking about because you were involved in that crime. But to say your last book makes no sense.
yeah,
So that was and that confused me because I thought I liked the idea that Dennehy wrote one book and then his writing career turns to shit, because it would be amazing if he finds out that he can only write books about his own life if he's on adventures or something,
yeah,
which is a hilarious version of, you can only, it's like the write what you know trope. So I would have loved it if he writes Inside Job, finds he can't write another book, so then that's the reason to kind of be enticed by this seedy underworld, when you partner him up with somebody who typically shows you some weird subculture, and now he's going to be enticed because he can't write unless he lives it.
yeah,
But they didn't really do that. It turns out he's got a bunch of books, and it
yeah.
turns out he's not really corruptible, and it's just it's like any moment then when you think it's going to go into interesting psychological territory, it always stops short just to stay more normal or something.
There's one thing that I think Cleve mentions to Meacham early on, where he says something like, you got a taste of the high life, but now you have money problems. And or I think he just said, like, there are money problems. And I remember thinking, okay, he doesn't look like he lives a very extravagant life in California. And there are a couple of hints where it's like, when they're in, I think, there's the one hotel scene where they get into the fight, and then Cleve comments that it's like a $1,200 a night suite. And the one time you see them flying, they're flying first class. But I genuinely couldn't tell if that was meant to be that Meacham had this runaway success and had just gotten this taste for slightly fancier things, or if that was Cleave's influence or what. And like, again, one of those things where I wish if this movie had been like 10 or 15 minutes longer, I'd have kind of liked them to tease that out a little bit more, because like I think Meacham is maybe a little bit more of an interesting character if there is that, like,
Yeah,
I want some nice I want a couple of more nice things. You know,
I think you're
then
right that it's supposed to be Cleve's stuff because he keeps making a point of, he's trying to be seductive, so he tries to get him to do a threesome with him, which was uniquely
yeah,
gross. And then he does, and then he's showing off what I had to freeze frame it. It looks like some sort of sushi, but it's actually just like cucumbers and raspberries. And he's like,
yeah,
I always like the finer things, Meacham or Dennis. Like, you can get cucumbers and you can get those things are not that fancy, but they're cut in a fancy way. But
yeah,
yeah, all those lines and the first class, that was either first class or that's what flying looked like in the 80s when you had a little room. I don't know.
yeah,
But I think it's definitely supposed to be that he's entered Cleve's world and his world is supposed to be seductive, but that's where the script kind of fails him because Dennis should be being corrupted, but he never is.
yeah,
I kept waiting for him to do something really cold blooded at least. I didn't expect him to have a threesome with James Woods, but
yeah,
I did expect him to at least do cross a line with violence when he sees maybe that there is no. It's almost like the movie is saying we have no answer for why James Woods is the way he is. There's a
yeah,
moment that I thought was kind of clever where they go to his home. And that's when it does what you were saying earlier, where he's dishonest, but you keep waiting for another ball to drop as far as what's really going on. And it's just these moments where every so often they'll say, well, he planned this. Every time Dennis thinks he's going to do something, he's a step ahead of him.
yeah.
And he'd already bought tickets to go see his family, who turns out are totally normal, a loving
Mm-hmm.
family, which is I thought was pretty clever because you thought, okay, he's going to show that it's like that other assassin movie, Panic, with the guy who's the guy who played Jerry Lundegaard in Fargo. I can't. Oh, William
Oh,
H
William H.
Macy.
Macy, yeah,
He's turned into a killer by his weird, creepy dad, Donald Sutherland. But no, none of those things. There's a hint that he strangled some chickens because his dad was too nice,
yeah,
which seems like a reversal of maybe what you expect that the cruelty of farm life. It was as nice as could be. His dad didn't even like killing the chickens they ate. So
I,
it's like every step of the way they're saying there's no answer for why he's the way he is. Um, but I don't know if that's purposeful or just that they didn't have an answer. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
Like, is that is it a reversal or is it just they don't have an answer to that question because it's pretty thin as far as the script?
I will say the fact that there is the line, and I jotted this down. I rewound it and jotted this down. The place where a vicious amoral killer was spawned and set loose on the world. We're going to Oregon.
Yeah, yeah, that was fun.
Yeah,
I I'm not sure why they even went there, to be honest. If it, I guess to make that point, but it's a kind of an arbitrary sequence.
yeah,
And everybody's totally normal, and they do have, I guess, the moment of he Dennehy's constantly insulting him, and it's one of those things where they if you put a character who's good with a character who's shitty, the audience, it's sort of human instinct to want the shitty person to kind of be nice, or you want them to like break through whatever walls they have up, even if the script isn't working or even if the performances are bad. You're just like, can that guy just be a little bit nicer? And so weirdly enough, I was just the whole time I was thinking like, Dennis, cut him a break. He saves your life constantly. He's it's weird that that's a real quick at the beginning when he first meets him, he almost falls into a pit of this broken the docks break and he almost falls. He's like, that's the second time I saved your life, Dennis, because he shot that guy earlier.
yeah,
And I thought, okay, that this is going to be interesting because James Woods is manufacturing scenarios to save him, to endear himself to him, because he kept making a point of that I rescued you. But then that didn't happen either.
yeah,
It seemed like it was going to be one of those crazy fireman who lights fires to put him out. But no,
Yeah.
he just happened to be there when Dennis was going to fall off a dock for no reason, besides shooting people during the holdup. So
Yeah.
yeah, all that stuff seemed to suggest that there was some sort of ultimate plan, but there never really was one. And
Yeah.
and then at the farmhouse, Dennis is insulting again, and they have that moment where he wakes up and James Woods is pointing a gun at him, but then he's pointing a gun at him, and he's like, "I guess this is a draw, Dennis." So I guess that was the point of that whole sequence, but
Yeah.
kind of odd, kind of odd.
There's also just the question of like Cleve's I mean, his plan initially is that he will enlist Meacham to write this book that will then bring down Matlock and his corporation. But then by the end of the film, he's like, I guess I'll just kill him. And I'm kind of like, but doesn't
Right.
that mean that you don't want to like? But why did you go through all of this trouble? Like,
Yeah, and that isn't even the part of the ending that Cohen didn't like, but yeah, the I think when you have somebody who's a writer's block, and this kind of goes into the theme of your podcast, the literary aspect of this movie is hilarious, and you find yourself. I don't know if this is just because maybe we write stuff, so we're kind of like we want all the details of this writing career of the cop, and they don't give you a lot, but they give you enough. They give you enough stuff to at least dwell on it, maybe more than they want you to dwell on it. But the idea that he needs a hit or he needs a new book, I think is more compelling than James Woods needs to out this criminal, because everybody seems to know he's a criminal. He's in hiding in plain sight. And like you said, they wrap it up with just an arbitrary kill all the bad guys. So the book is pointless. But the book as a way to get his career back that's what I just assumed was the real plot. And
yeah,
that is kind of that's the triumph at the end is he wrote another bestseller, or
yeah,
I guess a bestseller because it's in the window.
yeah.
And that's the title. So maybe it's like it needs another draft or something, another draft to flesh that stuff out.
There's also, and I guess maybe this kind of brings us into the woods of James Woods.
There you go.
I mean, I don't know. I have not read any any comments of that any of the cast or crew have said on this, but it's interesting to me that I mean, James Woods seems to be playing Cleve almost as less disaffected employee and more like spurned lover. Like there's the whole like the point where and I do think it was a very clever scene where like you see someone breaking to Meacham's house to steal the manuscript, and you think it's going to be Cleve, and then it turns out it's the guy who Matlock hired to replace him, and he tries the same thing to Meacham's daughter that he's like, oh, I'm a friend of your father's, and at that point she's just like, no, you're not. Like the other guy tried, kind of the implicit like the other guy tried that on me once and got me, and like
Yeah.
fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, shame on you. But like it's just it's but like yeah, again, Cleve is able to dispatch that guy just incredibly easily. Um and
Again,
it's
go ahead.
but it's also but it's like it's a little frustrating that it's like we never know exactly why Cleve broke with why Cleve and Matlock's what had been seemingly a fairly profitable arrangement for both of them, fell apart. And like, and I don't think it's literally meant to be the two of them had a sexual relationship. I think it's more that that's just how Woods is kind of playing.
He
Uh,
does. He plays it kind of like serpentine. He tries. I don't know, I want to call him trying to be sexy, but he's definitely trying to. I mean, there's an aspect of trying to seduce Dennis to
yeah,
the dark side, but that it kind of brings me back to the opening scene, because I always took it as that was the end of his career with Matlock. Was that just like it was the beginning and end of Dennis's career as a writer? Everything was intertwined in that moment, and it's unironically, I love the opening sequence. I think that it opens in a really, if you want a B movie, this is a really efficient, provocative opening.
Oh,
And,
absolutely. I agree completely. I agree
and to
completely.
where you think you're going to get a contemporary classic when you watch it. You don't get that.
Yeah.
But for a minute, you think this is really good. They've got the criminals are riding around in a Nixon van, but they've got this kind of double bluff going on where they've got a loudspeaker draw attention to themselves
Yeah.
because they're pretending to be, like campus radicals or something. They're wearing Nixon masks, and this was before, that becomes a thing later on, like dead presidents, Point Break,
Yeah.
dead presidents masks become a thing. I think they might have got there first as far as wearing the Nixon masks. And they have another kind of double bluff where they walk up the bank steps. I guess there's like three of them in a row. There's a homeless person on the steps, and you kind of do a double take, like, does that mean did they just kill somebody? Is it what's going on here? But no, that's just normal for that scene. They go inside this huge bank, or it looks more like a courthouse. It's huge.
Yeah.
And the security guard's like, what's going on? And he sees people in these masks, and they seem to be carrying a poster, but your immediate thought is, okay, there's a rifle in there. They're carrying a long tube. I've seen bank robberies before. There's no way that's a poster, but it is a poster. And they hang up a Nixon poster that says, this time, which I had to look that up because I thought there's got to be something to that. And it turns out that was his slogan when he was, he, and this is kind of an eerie parallel to what's going on now, I guess. But so Nixon was vice president, and then he ran for president in the 60s, and he famously loses to Kennedy because he's not telegenic. He's kind of weird on TV, right? He's a little creepy on TV. So when he comes back, he's coming back hard, Nixon is. And so his slogan is vote like your life depended on it. Or the long version, this time vote like your life depended on it, which has to be the most threatening campaign slogan I've ever heard. So there's no way that that's an accident, that Larry Cohen has the villains put up essentially, which and I was talking to my wife about it. She says it's when you do something like that and say this time, and then the audience that's familiar with it will fill in the rest. Vote like your life depended on it. When you leave something omitted like that and the audience fills it in, that's the enthymeme, where you omit the missing half.
Yeah.
And that's some sophisticated shit for the beginning of your B movie.
Yeah.
And also the heist of the weapons locker is very effective. Woods shoots a guy who's having a heart attack, which is ice cold.
Yeah.
Just he kind of laughs as the guy has a heart attack and shoots him. That was kind of a shock. He also they reveals that one of the police was in on it with him. And first you don't know if that's just Woods screwing around. And then he leaves Dennehy for dead, but he also stabs him. And I think that he was telling the truth. I guess we don't know, but he claims that he was kind of on death's door after he got stabbed by the cop. And that maybe that's what I always assumed, long story short, is what took him out of the criminal underworld. That he has if the movie had gone through that second draft, we would find more about James Woods' obsession with the guy who almost killed him.
Yeah.
Like that, Brian Denny turned out to be a very good cop in that moment, which is the kind of thing where it's fun to see the villain say, this motherfucker got me, and I need to be part of his life in some way.
Yeah.
But we don't quite get that. And like you said, it's kind of vague that why is he on the outs with this organization? I think that that's what it was supposed to be. In that moment blew them all apart, all those pieces. And James Woods brings Dennehy back together under the guise of getting back at his former boss, but mostly because, in a nutshell, he's in love with him. Because they shared that moment.
Yeah.
So,
and it's interesting that when there are two things about James Woods' performance in this. One is that there's that scene at the bar where he's hitting on the woman who he eventually sleeps with and tries to bring Meacham.
That was a real roller coaster, wasn't
it? But he also keeps saying, like, oh, this is my brother, and like, and Meacham is never like, oh yeah, this is my brother, like, and And there's that, just that sort of it, there, the scene where he's the scene where Dennehy realizes that, like, oh, you weren't the wheelman on that job, you were the guy who shot me, is
Great
with the
scene,
cigarette burning. And
great reveal.
yeah, I I have to say, like, I assumed there was going to be some kind of a reveal that he was not the wheelman in the job, but I was expecting it to come at the end of the movie, and I think, and I was, the fact that it comes like halfway through was a much better. But it's also kind of, and I think this comes out of Woods's performance a little bit, like the fact that he mentions that he's been doing the cigarette burning trick, for since he was 15. It's like you're watching him and you're like, this is, he's kind of like a little kid. He's kind of like a little kid's idea of what a tough guy is, more than, he is obviously a grown man and very lethal and very terrifying in places, but there's also this core of, like, kind of wanting, like, to just be like the little brother to a big bear of a man who's,
Yeah,
I I,
yeah.
I don't know.
That's the cigarette thing, because there's two tells, like a double tell. You keep waiting for the knife wound, because the cigarette thing struck me as odd, just because I've recently rewatched Videodrome, and it was no surprise that this is a post Videodrome movie, because Woods is kind of vamping it up like he did in that. He's kind of playing it psychosexual,
Yeah,
which is kind of a James Woods thing, but also he feels very much like the guy in Videodrome. And it's got some direct callbacks or swipes, or maybe Woods just couldn't shake that performance. But
yeah.
one of them is, of course, he seems to be appropriating Debbie Harry's cigarette trick
Hmm.
in Videodrome. He sees her, that she has these injuries, and he's kind of shocked by it. So, like, for him to become the psychosexual S&M kind of deal in this movie, is that like a late addition to, I don't know, but they've got kind of a more of a Lawrence of Arabia spin on it. He's doing the trick is not minding that it hurts, Mr. Potter. But all this sort of, it hurts, or you like the pain, Dennis. She wants you to hurt her, Dennis. He's trying to get him to beat on the woman he picks up, but like in a cute way. I'm doing the
Yeah.
quotes for, if this is not on video. In a cute way, he wants to, have this sexual moment with her. And there's just the weirdest edit where he picks up the girl, and all three seem to go home to hang out. And I just didn't know where that sequence was going with,
Yeah.
because he's real creepy. He kind of brushes his hand across her neck in the bar, and this is a stranger. And so you think, okay, now they're going to lean into this guy's dangerous and creepy. But instead, it's like, no, he's actually a ladies' man,
Yeah.
which is just bizarre. And then
Although,
the edit goes to the hotel room where Dennis is still firing off all these threats. I'm going to kill you, Cleve. And, then hard cut to Woods coming out of a hotel room, like Brad Pitt in Fight Club when he snaps a rubber glove, like, hey, time to finish her off, bro. It was just all so weird. Those sequences were very Videodrome,
yeah.
where I thought it was in a different movie for a minute.
There's also, I mean, there's also the scene much later in the film where Woods is threatening the Victoria Tennant character, who's Meacham's agent, which for me was maybe I mean, it seemed to come in the film at a point of just like the kind of, like, just as a reminder, like, this is not a lovable guy who's having a redemption arc. This is a genuinely
Right.
terrifying man who has killed a lot of people. And, like, the way that it's kind of the way that it's kind of structured like a rape scene, but it's not. It's just him hacking her clothes apart, and,
Yeah.
oh man, it's
Yeah.
so fucking
It's
creepy.
it's sort of
Oh
what you expected, then didn't get, and then they give it to you after they've tried to win you over, with which, again, if that's purposeful, okay, good job freaking this out. but it feels more like the movie's off kilter, that it's not sure what to do with him. I
Yeah.
think was it right before that where James Woods is singing in a bar? it's and that's not presented for laughs.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you find out Clint Eastwood plays the piano in the Line of Fire. It's supposed to give him another dimension. So they're constantly trying to, they are winning you over with him, sometimes accidentally, because we have nowhere to go except to him when we're stuck with a very straight and narrow Brian Dennehy. But also, I think there are attempts where either the director and the writer were of two minds. Maybe the Larry Cohen thing was, this guy's, you got to make him a lot creepier. Or Larry Cohen said, I love this creepy guy. You're going to love him too. But the director seems like a very kind of down the middle kind of guy who's made some classics. I actually had to Google him, this guy Flynn. Did you check
He
out
did
some of
The
his
Outfit,
movies?
Rolling Thunder.
Yeah. So Rolling Thunder is no slouch. That is a very subversive movie that I didn't expect from the person who made this kind of playing it safe assassin movie.
Yeah.
And The Outfit is also got some whoa, what just happened moments.
Yeah.
The rest of the stuff is kind of like work for hire, I guess. He had the
Yeah.
Stallone lockup, which I enjoy.
Yeah.
Speaking of Donald Sutherland, and then he has, in my opinion, the only good Steven Seagal movie, Out for Justice, just because it has some funny gags in it, where he beats up a bunch of people in a bar and he keeps throwing one guy into a phone booth and closing the door really fast, and which I think is a pretty insulting thing to do to someone if you're just constantly throwing somebody into a phone booth and closing the door. Um, I guess maybe I shouldn't say the only Steven Seagal movie with a part that I enjoy. I would say that.
Yeah.
Actually, I take it back. He's in Under Siege. He's got some moments in that. Yeah, he's just, speaking of like James Woods, who's ruined any squandered goodwill that people may have had.
Yeah.
Steven Seagal was a real favorite when we were watching movies back then.
Yeah.
He was doing something different, and so was James Woods. Which, I mean, maybe that should lead to just the elephant in the room, the elephant in the woods, as you said, the James Woods problem. So I don't know about you, but I kind of have a sliding scale of how I deal with separating the art from the shit bag.
Yeah. No, I
It depends. I
yeah.
guess it depends on, there's a couple things that I subconsciously, I think, take into account, which is one of the most important is, did I see or hear or read the thing before I found out the person was a piece of shit? Because as I'm not a time traveler, so I can't go back and change the impact that piece of art may have had after the fact. Whether I revisit as much is probably going to change, but I can't change the impact of it had on me because when I didn't know. So that's probably affects me the most as far as if I care if the artist is garbage. But the next factor is, this is where it starts to get a little tricky with this guy, is did they say something or did they do something? The difference between James Woods at first seems to be, this is a guy who says nonstop stupid shit on the internet.
Yeah.
Whereas, say, Kevin Spacey seems to actually be predatory. So they don't feel like they're in the same phone booth. We're stuck in the same phone booth with them.
Yeah.
But then you start hearing, like, did James Woods mistreat Sean Young during the boost? Some accounts seem to suggest they were mutual sadists. I don't know, but like you just said, people that he worked with, what was he doing back then but then here's the last factor. And this is where I think it deviates maybe from a lot of people, which is, if I'm going to engage in art involving human garbage, does the person also play human garbage?
Yeah.
And if they do, I'm kind of into it. I don't know. Woods playing a stream of terrible sleaze bags all his career seems like the most natural thing in the world. And it's easier then to digest, like if he has a stream of consciousness idiocy that he's posting online, you can like at least put a hand in front of that fire hose, right? You don't have to drink that.
Yeah.
And instead, it's like you watch his movies and you get that icky feeling, but it's not like Tom Hanks or something. You know what I mean? Does that make any sense?
I mean, I felt that
before I said it out loud, it made more sense.
Well, it's like I think, like, to slightly digress or slightly take a tangent here. Like, I think I missed watching Baby Driver when it was first out, and finally watched it about a year or two ago. And this was after all of the stuff had come out about Kevin Spacey. And I was like, is this going to be weird? And then I was like, well, no, because Kevin Spacey is playing a pretty bad guy in this movie. So it's like, this is not, I, there isn't really a really difficult thing to like, to kind of, there isn't really a disconnect between like the actor's public persona and the role that they're playing. So it's like,
Sure.
okay, I can, and I think, yeah, and I
And
agree.
I
The
think
same
that's
thing
why a
is
lot
true.
of people rationalized it when they stuck with House of Cards, where he plays a real evil
Yeah,
guy. I think in the back of people's minds, it's like, well, great. That's just an extra layer so that
yeah,
I can hate him a little bit more.
yeah,
Um, but then you start thinking, well, that's this is somebody who's making a ton of money. He's taking up this space. Should he be
yeah,
taking up this space if he's abusing it? Um,
yeah,
but no, I hear what you're saying.
yeah,
I think, I didn't realize Baby Driver was right around because we were into House of Cards over here, and when he stopped being on House of Cards, we thought, well, I guess that makes sense, I guess. But we also stopped watching House of Cards without him because what's the point?
yeah,
You know, I guess if I was being more mindful, I would say, well, I'm going to support it even without him because he shouldn't be able to suck all the
yeah,
oxygen away from that. But he did because it was all about him.
yeah,
So I guess it went down. He went down with the ship. The ship went down with him.
yeah.
Um,
There
but
was,
I guess
yeah,
as far as James Woods, I wanted to ask you, like, I guess maybe in a perfect world, before he started turning into crazy old man online and just got sick of listening to him, um, it seems tough to avoid him nowadays. Or maybe that's the algorithm because I clearly watch James Woods movies. So the internet's, oh, you want to hear what your buddy's doing? But I was going to ask you what your experiences with James Woods. He's got some bangers. He's
yeah,
got some really good movies, and then he's got a lot of not so great movies. But I would maybe argue that he's always putting in an effort. He's always giving us.
yeah.
He's always
No,
giving you something.
I would agree. I think, I mean, you know, like the man also has a pretty vast filmography, and like, you know, I mean, even in something like this where, you know, I'm not seeing his his I'm not this I don't think this would be I think this is a better perform I think I would say his performance is the best thing about this film. um
Yeah,
but I also wouldn't put this film, I mean, like, given that, like, he's the lead in Videodrome, and like he has a supporting role in Casino, and it's like I would,
yeah,
those are like, he has been in genuinely like fantastic movies, and like this is a good movie that for my mind, it's a good movie that like occasionally shows flashes of how it could be a better movie. uh
yeah.
I mean, on the other hand, but yeah, I would absolutely put him, I have never seen an uninteresting James Woods performance.
Or yeah, like I've never seen a lazy James Woods. I've seen him in some bad movies, but and I think that people are smart with how they use him. I've kind of got I think of him in that there's like these three types of movies I see James Woods in. As far as top tier James Woods, I would say I kind of have a three-way tie. Videodrome. I don't know if you've seen Cop, that adaptation of the Elroy book.
No,
That
no, I
might be
haven't
one,
actually. That
unless
sounds
you
really
get
good though.
James Woods out. That might be one good for your show as far as because it's a adaptation of the Elroy book. But he's they use him really well in that. It's kind of like if they had flipped the casting of Bestseller and James Woods played the cop, but he couldn't dial down his ick factor.
Yeah.
That's the movie Cop, and it works really, really well.
Hmm.
And also The Hard Way with Michael J. Fox. I think that was
Oh wow, yeah.
one of the only times, maybe the only time, they've got a likable performance out of it. I don't know how they did it, what sorcery they used, but he plays the normal guy. He still has those kind of Dennis Leary rant moments, but they work even better in that because he's keeping it, he's trying to keep it together that whole movie. And Michael J. Fox is really hilarious in that as somebody who just keeps needling him. So that is a real anomaly in the James Woods filmography, is where they got a likable performance out of him. That's one I think you could recommend to anybody. Is that is an entertaining Hollywood movie. They got him into a Hollywood movie and it worked at least once.
Yeah.
But like you said, a lot of these big directors will use him kind of as the sleazebag for hire in Casino.
Yeah.
There was Against All Odds. Any Given Sunday, he plays the shady doctor, the team doctor. So he's got those sleazebag for hire roles. And then he's got this, what I call the James Woods is in every scene, but the movie's not that good movies. This might be one of those, but Salvador, The Boost, probably Vampires. Like you get James Woods is never not on the screen, but the movie's not great, but he totally carries it on his shoulders.
Yeah.
Or Diggstown. I don't know if you ever saw Diggstown.
No, I've heard, but there's one critic who I read pretty regularly who is like, will periodically make the case for Diggstown as like an under-recognized film. And
it's fun in a Mammoty kind of way. Like if you like capers where somebody's trying to trick somebody.
I do.
Oh, then I would recommend it. It's got, don't let anybody spoil the ending, because it actually has an ending where you go, oh shit. And then you have to kind of say, all right, you kind of earned that.
Nice.
And there are some actual laugh out loud moments with James Woods, but yeah, he's kind of in every scene and he's dialed it up. He's nonstop trying to keep the balls in the air. It's a lot like Night in the City, that kind of mid Robert De Niro movie where it's not amazing, but De Niro is really hustling in that.
Yep. Yeah.
It's kind of similar. But Diggstown's more of a comedy. I'd be curious what you think of that. I'd be curious how it holds up.
This might be the push I need to check it out.
I think it's on Tubi right now.
Oh, nice.
That one and Salvador and The Boost were on there. The Boost I tried to watch that one. I kind of got it 10 minutes in. It's like, okay, I get it. We're gonna watch the disintegration of this kind of yuppie couple, and we're gonna watch them embarrass themselves. And I don't know. It felt like a Larry Clark movie, like I think, James Woods do a Larry Clark movie? The guy who did Kids, and
yeah.
It felt like it wanted to be a movie like that, but it just didn't have it. But the same way Falling Down feels like an attempt to make a subversive movie, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's really middle of the road. But yeah, that's my attempts to cope with James Woods these days. In a nutshell, that's laid out on the psychiatrist table. That's how I dealt with it.
What did you had mentioned that that the screenwriter is famously not happy with how it ended. So what was his original vision? Because
he let me think. He said it was much more. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I thought that maybe he was mad that it was the let's not kill him, let's take him in, and then there's like a weird moment where the girl is being held hostage, and I thought maybe Larry Cohen was like, well, you've softened it too much. You had a very, very Hollywood confrontation at the end, and everything kind of wraps up. But it was actually more specific. He was really annoyed that the daughter came running down the stairs and put herself in harm's way. I guess he just said that's stupid. And he said it threw off the ending.
Yeah, it's funny because I can kind of see that though, because I'm watching this and I'm like, why?
She like runs
when literally both of them are like, stay where you are, and like she has never been portrayed as like a particular, like, she got into the car with James Woods at the beginning, but like they've kind of established that he's charming and he could just be like, oh, I know your father and I know all these things about him. But like, yeah, it's really frustrating. I mean, in any movie, but especially this one, where just like if a character is just acting, just has to act incredibly stupidly, right? Just like to make the plot work. It's like,
Right. It's
and
almost as bad as when they get to somebody, they've been trying to get to somebody the whole time, then they get to them and they say, "You're not worth it," and then they don't go through with the revenge. It kind of felt like that. Like they'd orchestrated a bunch of their chess pieces to come out easy.
yeah,
And it seemed like kind of a cheap way to end it. But going back to that scene with when Dennehy finds out that she got in the car with him, that's some great acting by Dennehy, because he first hears about it and you can tell that he immediately thinks, "Is that fucker that's been stalking me for the first 15 minutes of this movie?" And he's picked up my daughter from school, and he very nicely gets more information out of her, and then he finally takes that big ham-sized fist of his and pounds the table. He's like, "Are you crazy? Get into a car with a stranger?" And
yeah.
what do you? Of course, we're hearing, "Are you crazy? Get into a car with James Woods? Who would do that? Who would do that?"
Which honestly seems like pretty decent advice. And
Oh
that,
yeah, well, there was something I was going to ask you about the was the thing where when he is he torment let me think back. He torments Dennis Meacham's publisher, right? That's who he's tearing up her clothes.
I thought she was his agent, but that's but I honestly don't know. I mean, and I guess because just thinking about it, it seemed to be more likely that she would be an agent based in California and she would be the first reader of it, and like the other dudes at the like marina lunch with them were the publishers, but it also seemed weird that like multiple publishing industry people would fly out to LA
Yeah,
just to like take someone out to lunch and be like, you
and tell him he
we
sucks.
really need this manuscript from you.
Yeah, you're 10 days late. Yeah, so that I guess that's the question I had, because you pointed out how oddly brutal that sequence was where he's slicing up her clothes and how it's kind of off-putting.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of in Birdman, where Michael Keaton accosts the reviewer, where you feel like you're seeing some dirty laundry. You're like, is this the the filmmaker or the writer's opinion of agents or Hollywood? Like he's chopping up those clothes as a probably more anger than you've seen him show in the entire movie. And this
Yeah.
isn't even somebody who has anything to do with him.
Yeah.
But it seems like it's like he really wanted to direct this anger at this representative of Hollywood. And there's all sorts of little Hollywood digs, like at the table full of people when they're saying, so what, or Denny, goes, "What about the movie deal? What about our movie deal?" And they're like, "Zero interest," which is funny because you're watching the movie. And
Yeah.
then later you find out you're kind of watching the movie. I guess we're watching because the final book he writes is Retribution, which is not James Woods' story at all. Thanks for the betrayal, Dennis. He was supposed to write his life story. He's not even part of it.
Yeah.
The subtitle, I think, has to do with the fall of the Murdoch Empire.
Yeah.
Like you expected it to be like a weekend with a killer, but instead it's all about the fall of, and nobody cares about that. The movie didn't care about the the big bad guy climax as far as mowing down what seems to be 100 suit wearing bodyguards.
Yeah.
They just seem to serve no purpose. Not They try to make a couple of them scarier than the rest, but
Yeah.
it seems like. But I guess my point is, what is this a more of a Hollywood middle finger than maybe, or maybe it started out that way. Maybe there's not a whole lot of that left in it.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I don't know if you noticed any more digs at films or the process um,
That that honestly seemed
or the book. Where's the book stuff? Is there any
yeah.
more book stuff in this movie about a book? supposedly about a book.
Not a ton. I mean, unless, and this is an absolute stretch. The scene where the cab driver who has like set them up is hiding in the arcade, and James Woods kills him and like leaves the photograph in
Yeah,
the which
great sequence.
yeah. Although it's one of those things where I'm watching the New York City geography, and I'm like, so did they chase the guy from like the Tribeca to Times Square? Because that's a really, especially when, and I say this as a fairly large man myself, Brian Dennehy's not a little guy and the cab driver's not a little guy, and I'm like, I don't, that's a, if this is actually going from there to there, like that's a really long chase for two guys who are maybe not in the best physical shape.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
guess
to,
the legit that chase did make a that was a weird sequence anyway. As far as I mean, the pictures coming out with the little step by step throat cutting
yeah,
was I thought was kind of brilliant, but everything up to that point was bizarre. He because James Woods is supposed to be this amazing assassin who's nobody gets the drop on him, and so they get into a cab. The cabbie is conspicuously sweaty. They make a point of showing you that a couple times. First time they showed it, I thought, oh, I wonder if they got a real cab driver who doesn't want to be in this movie. And then they do it again. It's like, okay, this
yeah,
he's in on it. So Woods does not notice that. Then the guy says, "Hey, mind if I stop and get some smokes?" And then the cab driver leaves, and they sit there for quite a long time, long enough for him to notice the cab driver buying the cigarettes, then noticing the cab driver scurry away like a rat, like, oh shit.
yeah,
And then he says, "Get out of the car, Dennis," and it blows up. It just seemed like it was been a perfect time for slick pro, like Woods.
yeah,
Just have him realize he's already been saving Dennis enough. So do it again. And a good gag might be like he notices that the cabbie stopped the meter when he got out. Like reflexively, the cabbie knows he's not coming back to that car. And so he turns the meter off, and maybe like
yeah,
just because out of habit, a taxi driver knows when the ride's over, and the ride is literally over because it's gonna blow up. And maybe Woods is like looks over and says, "Why did you stop the meter? Get out of the car." Anything else, instead of sitting there for like, why didn't it blow up? It had
yeah,
a long time before that thing blew up. But then they save it by, you know, ganking the cabbie in the photo booth. They're going back to do it, and it's kind of lazy. Well, I'm a sadistic killer, so I'm a, and not. This is another question I had for you. Is he a mafia guy, or is he a psycho? Because
mm,
they make a point earlier in the movie to make a dig about the mafia killer movies that they doesn't Denny say, "What are you selling, mafia hitman? Nobody buys that shit." And if it's a mafia hitman movie, he's I don't think he's that kind of animal. I think he's
yeah.
supposed to be a psycho. If there is the distinction even worth talking about? I don't know.
It's interesting too, because now that you say this, I'm gonna look this. I'm gonna do a quick bit of research on the phone here. Uh, but
The power of the internet. What are you looking for?
so the thing that I'm trying to it's not okay. Hang on. So this is so this movie is 87. Okay.
Yes.
So it's interesting, and I'm very curious if this might have had something to do with it, because the book Wise Guy came out in 85,
Oh yeah.
and I wonder if maybe like you know if but I don't even know, because I don't, again, this does, beyond that, it doesn't have anything to really say about the mafia, and like we never really know, like, how did this guy from this like very white bread family in rural Oregon you know become a criminal,
Yeah. And
robber, and then assassin.
and technically, I guess, more killer than assassin. But again,
Yeah,
is that just how James Woods has those beady little insectoid eyes, and he's got that thing when he's being gross, when he's dialing up the shit bag, where he kind of
Mhm.
talks with his tongue.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain. It's like a signal. He knows the character is supposed to be gross, and he knows he has to ham it up. And in his natural state, he's already kind of scary. So when he tries to ramp it up and be scary, it's kind of comical to me because he'll kind of do this thing with this. I can't even do it. But I just it's because it's when he's trying to be normal when I find him the most compelling and obnoxious. And I put that in the same category. And that's why the movie Cop, I would say, is a great showpiece because he's trying to be supposedly the hero, and somehow he's no less sleazy in that. But in this, there are moments when you could tell. I don't know if it was Woods like realizing he was kind of in a corny,
Yeah.
cash grab of a movie. But he does this kind of this thing with his tongue, and it made me think, okay, he's playing it like in with the video dramey stuff. He's playing it like he's a psycho, not that he's a efficient hitman who is he because he starts out kind of an efficient hitman, and then once Dennis handcuffs him, he kind of loses it in the car, and he almost immediately becomes James Woods,
Yeah.
where he's like, "You got to uncuff me, Dennis. I'm going to tell you the," and he starts doing his James Woods thing, and you think, oh, because for the first 15 minutes, you were a very quiet, coolly efficient killer, but you're going to be a crazy person. You're going to be a psycho in this. And maybe I'm stuck on the distinction there, but I think that James Woods, I think that's why they wanted to kind of telegraph that it's not a mafia hitman thing, even though that became a genre. Like
Yeah.
Sopranos is psychiatrist talks to a mafia hitman, analyze this, analyze that. Panic, like I said earlier, with William H. Macy. Maybe The Accountant with Ben Affleck. There's
Yeah.
a huge market for a killer sits down with somebody and tells them why they do what they do. And this seemed to like say, we're not going to do that before it became commonplace to do that. Um,
It's interesting you mentioned The Sopranos because there was one aspect of this that reminded me of like one subplot from The Sopranos, which was the point. I think it was, I don't know if it was the first or second season, but it's the are you a Sopranos viewer?
yeah, we were going to do a rewatch recently, actually. Yeah, big fan.
The because I was reminded a little bit of the whole subplot where Big Pussy becomes an FBI informant, and
Mhm.
he's like starts trying really really hard to be like to kind of go above and beyond to the point where it's like both comical and a little tragic because it's like this is not going to work out well for him. And like there was a little bit of like the points in this where James Woods is like the insecure little kid aspect of the personality came to the forefront, which was very little reminded me of that, where it was like this like I really want to please this person,
Yeah.
even though I kind of know that like this is not gonna work out well for me at all.
Yeah, no, I think you're dead on with that because there is a line where the mother says, "Oh, he never had a big brother." So I don't know whether that's to dispel the what seemed to be a romance brewing,
Yeah.
but clearly he's enamored with the guy who stabbed him. I
Yeah.
mean, the Freud would have a field day with that. The guy who stabbed him is he'll never forget him,
Yeah.
and whether it's as a brother, as you know, some sort of surrogate relationship that he's never
Yeah.
had, um, he's there. That's all the emotion of the movie is in that direction.
Can
Um,
you give me 2 seconds? I just need someone's at my door, and I'll
oh
be back
shit!
in two
I hope you're
seconds.
not attacked.
Same here. Same here. Back. Back.
Oh, all right. You lived. You survived.
I did.
The mysterious knock at the door. Who the hell knocks on your door?
The
Does
buzzer
that
was in
still
the
happen?
background.
Oh my god. I can't imagine someone coming to my door right now.
Yeah.
Wow.
If I get a knock, it's probably my like it's usually upstairs neighbors or at one point
You're in New York. You're in a Larry Cohen movie right now.
it's the winged serpent. It's I've actually never seen Q but I've seen the trailer a bunch of times, and I'm like, this looks like the greatest movie ever made.
It's as good as you think it is.
Yes.
It's funny, and it's Moriarty, like I said, is a great Larry Cohen surrogate. But yeah,
Yeah.
just when we talking about the ending. There's a did you catch that moment when they show the only time we see a flash of the book being written, there's like a page in a typewriter or something, or maybe it's a script page, and the words that you see kind of suggest that it's the script for the movie we're watching, or
Oh, interesting.
there's some line about somebody says need oh yeah, James Wood picks it up, he's like, needs an ending, Dennis. Which is a fun meta moment, but also it seems to suggest again that maybe the book Retribution is the movie bestseller, which I
Yeah.
thought was kind of fun. And it's I'm being pretty critical of it, but there are a few moments that elevate it to that good B movie status.
Yeah.
When he Woods shoots the corpse more times than necessary, I thought that's something they would normally do
Yeah.
in the feature film.
Yeah.
There's also there's an attempt, I think, to get a kind of a laugh with each of the murders at the end. He has these generic killing of bodyguards, but with each one he does something cute.
Yeah.
He breaks
What's their
one of their
name?
necks.
Turner.
What's
Sorry,
that?
Turner.
Yeah, he says with one of them he says like he kills him and then he says forgot to flushes the toilet. Another one he says put your cup down, and that's so he can drink the tea before he leaves. Another one he breaks his neck and he says to the girl's like, did you hurt him? She's like, no, I just put him out. So there's at least 4 or 5 attempts to, I don't know if those are just like the Hollywood zingers when you kill somebody, but it's trying to get some sort of meaning to that very machine-like ending. But then I find out that there's some cameos, that some of those are uncredited actors. Carter, he says he calls somebody Carter, but that wasn't in the credits. And I thought, I know that guy. I've seen that actor before. And it's in Life Aquatic, the guy who plays Esteban, the one who's eaten. He's one of the assassins, and he's apparently one of those kind of B movie guys where everybody seems to know him. And there's a couple of them where, so maybe as an inside joke, they just filled the house full of friends. But yeah, it made me think, are we dealing with maybe a John Landis situation, or isn't he puts a bunch of directors in as people to mow down? But yeah, it's the ending is rough because nothing really happens, but there are some attempts to keep it going, and it has this might sound like a contradiction. It's got an 80s flavor to it. There's a video arcade, there's breakdancing in the background. One of the marquees says Rodney Dangerfield Back to School, a hilarious movie. But the movie doesn't make any sense. You know what I'm saying? Like it's in the 80s, but it doesn't feel like an 80s movie. Even though it has breakdancing and an arcade, it never feels like a movie that would have those things in it. And I don't know if that's a lack of effort or if it's more realistic of what it's like the meme when it says people think this is the 80s and they show you a bunch of Stranger Things sets, and then they say, and this was the 80s, and you see a wood paneled room with somebody smoking a cigarette. It kind of had that. It felt like it was of its moment, 1987, in a real way. Which I liked.
It's also one of those.
Oh, go ahead.
It's also, I mean, it's also of the moment, in part because there were points where I was thinking about, especially the logistics of the final third, where it's like, well, if any of these characters had a cell phone or even a pager, like we would not be in this position
exactly
at all.
That's what's great about you've seen The Way of the Gun.
I think so, but it's been a very long time.
All through that movie, everybody's cell phones stop working. So there's and that's sidestep exactly what you're saying, that one phone call and everything changes. So everybody's constantly flipping open a phone and saying, no reception. And that's just keeps it moving in a very 80s way, even though it's I guess, is it 90s, 2000? But yeah, they ran into the
early 2000s.
Yeah, that same issue.
Yeah.
What'd you think of that big that cheesy song at the end, Perfect Ending,
Holy shit!
love theme
I
from bestseller.
jotted down. Oh my, hey, like it's very weird that like this is written as a love song. Like this,
Who's
the like I
it?
looked, I was like, who did this? And I was like, Lamont Dozier wrote it, and Benny King sang it. Like that's, I mean, those are two guys with a lot of really who've done a lot of really amazing music, and like I hate to say it, it is not the best work of either songwriter or singer. Uh, but it's also so we need a theme song for this movie. Like, all right, let's do it.
Yeah, that's one of those that throws you for a loop. That he did, maybe he thought it was a love story. Um, I don't know.
I
The
was I was gonna I was gonna I wasn't necessarily gonna watch the end credits, and then that song kicked in, and I was just like, oh my god, like I absolutely have to to stick around for this. Oh my god.
Yeah, those are some good stuff. I wish now that I hear that about Paul Shinar, the voice, the Scarface guy,
Yeah.
I wonder if that might be what threw it off balance. That um, I'm kind of into your theory now that he was good with the scenes he had just because he's got that voice.
Yeah.
But if he would have, they needed an antagonist to take the I don't know, to give us some momentum so that it's not just mowing down a bunch of guys in suits.
Yeah.
Because you kind of long for there to be somebody even above him. Like I found myself even wanting one of those scenes like in a movie where they discover a photo and it's a bunch of guys on a fishing trip and they zoom in and it's like, oh shit, there's another guy. He's involved. It has
Yeah.
none of that. There are no surprises in this movie. The villain, they show him to you in the first half hour, and then they just sort of kill their way to him and kind of not in a great way. And maybe the villain had some more diabolical stuff where he could have used that voice.
Yeah.
I actually Googled him. This is kind of funny. Do you remember the game Dragon's Lair?
Yes.
So that Laserdisc video game, they had a follow-up to it called Space Ace. I don't know if you remember that one,
I do.
which very similar. He was to be the voice of the hero in those Space Ace games, either is him, was him, or for some reason he's associated with Space Ace.
Mm.
I thought that was fascinating just because I kind of went down the internet rabbit hole of who these bit actors were, and if it is kind of a series of cameos or friends having bit parts. But
Yeah.
I hesitate to bring up the video game thing actually, because did you see the recent poll that says attract the most unattractive hobbies for men?
I did not see this.
The top one is video games, which probably includes Laserdisc video games. Also followed by collecting comic books, bird watching, gambling. Gambling is the most top 5 unattractive things for men hobbies, and magic tricks. Or also they should say being a cop in a movie, because there's so many movies where they hide being a cop because they know it'll ruin the new relationship, which always fascinated me. The idea of once they find out a cop, they always turn on me.
Yeah.
But here's a question: what do you think the most unattractive hobbies for women were? Because it had another meme.
I have no idea, honestly.
True crime podcasts, astrology, laying eggs, and crying. I don't think it was a real meme.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think human women lay eggs.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, this is unless this is like from some parallel, like it just crossed over from the parallel universe in which mammals, in which I guess humans are marsupials, or like
That's
we actually
it's probably
evolved
a
from platypuses.
James Woods Twitter rant. Women I hate when they lay eggs, into astrology.
They just listen to the entire true crime podcast, and then once it's done, there's an egg. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Oh shit. That might be a sign that we've exhausted the topic. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think I've kind of reached all the stuff I have notes about. Anything else you wanted to bring up?
I think that was probably about it. Yeah. Um,
And is there? I know you have a new book coming out in the coming months, and a reissue of an older book coming out a couple of months after that. So anything you
oh
want to plug?
yeah. Um, Shallow Ends is the newest book. It's coming out on September 24th. The pre-order is up wherever your books are sold. And in January of 2026, so you got a full year um, away. Head Cleaner is going to be reissued by Datura,
Nice.
which is fun because uh, it didn't quite get it didn't quite find its audience, and the demise of the previous publisher kind of worked in the favor of a lot of the authors over there, where people swooped in and picked them up. So it's going to get a new cover and a maybe a slightly new edit. It, I don't know. It might not make sense, that book, but I might want to make it make less sense, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Head Cleaner in 2026, and
Nice.
Shallow Ends is the new one. Also, I have a listicle of best fake books and movies, and
Oh,
I
nice.
would definitely have put one of Dennis Meacham's books in that list if I had, studied this movie as much as I did in the last couple of weeks. But if you Google best fake books and movies in my name, you'll find it. It's in a couple places. It's on the old Lit Reactor site, which I think somebody bought up, but it's
Yeah.
also on another site, X Radio X. It's called something
Oh,
like
yeah.
that. So yeah, that's
Check it out.
I think that if you enjoy talking about fake books and movies, and this seems to be the place for it.
Excellent.
Um, I really got into what were my favorites, and I would probably put Dennis Meacham in the honorable list, honorable
Nice.
mentions. So,
Very cool.
awesome.
Thanks so much for doing this, and I'll
Yeah,
let you
this
know
was a
what's up.
blast.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a rating on your app of choice. Our email address is framedandboundpodcast@gmail.com. Our theme music is Arvid Franzen and Eric Berg's Life in the Woods of Finland via the Internet Archive. Again, thank you for listening and have a great night.